Welcome to the Wander Mode podcast, where we celebrate the fearless spirit of women embracing life's wanderings. Where every story is a spark of inspiration and reminds us that sometimes the most beautiful moments happen when we simply embrace wherever the journey may lead. Today's guest is Angelina Moehlmann, the author of Destination Baby and a passionate advocate for women navigating adoption and fertility journeys. As an educator and supporter, she is dedicated to helping women feel understood and empowered through the ups and downs of building a family. We'll be diving into her own experiences, what inspired her to write her book, and how she's making a difference for women facing these challenges. This conversation is going to be both insightful and inspiring, and I can't wait for you to hear it. Angie, this has been on the calendar for just a little bit now, and I've been excitedly looking forward to our conversation, mostly because you also sent me that copy of your book, and I've been able to start it before this interview, which I thought was perfect timing. But thanks so much for being on the podcast today.
You're so welcome. I'm really excited to be here.
So where are you sitting at as a mom, entrepreneur, book writer, all of the things?
Literally, I'm sitting in a big pile of imposter syndrome. And when I say that, I feel that I have tried many different things in my life. And to be here in this moment is very interesting. So I'll call it my past life, I was an educator. I was a teacher first, and then moved on to becoming a technology coach and then assistant principal and principal. And about that time, I decided that it was 24 years in education. And I was like, this is the perfect scenario where I can retire. I use air quotes, retire early and still get my pension, but then have a whole life in front of me. So I kind of think of my life as like all of these chapters, and I've just been given another chapter. And so literally sitting here right now, I have decided to work as a STEM advocate with a local university. And then I had this open time and I was like, I have had a calling for the last 15 years to write a book and share our story, and it's time. So that's kind of where I'm at right now.
Okay, so I have to ask because I am also a former teacher. I taught for 16 years in middle school. So I have to ask, what was that transition like for you of letting go of that teaching piece, retiring a little bit early to do something else? Was that an easy decision for you? Did it take you a while to settle into what that new life looked like?
Yeah, to be honest, I know everyone, I feel like everyone has these stories about like COVID impacted them in a certain way. But for me, it was just as a principal. I mean, I know that the teachers were struggling severely, but as a principal, it was just so incredibly hard this time in our life where we were trying to work from home and still be a mother and still be a wife and do all of these things. And then returning back to school and seeing the impact of that in our day-to-day work. And then around that time, my mom also was diagnosed with cancer, and I knew that I was going to be caring for her. So I just felt like I was being pulled in all these different directions, but the majority of my energy was going to a space and a place that was my job. And as much as I truly love being around people and being around children and working with families in that role, it's as though I was leaving my own family behind. And so I just knew that I needed to make a switch. And to be quite honest, while I was nervous financially, it just felt like the right time to be able to take this jump and risk. And, looking back, it's honestly one of the best decisions that I've ever made.
That is awesome too, especially as it correlates to the timing with you being able to have it as an early retirement. I know that pension piece is huge, especially for financial security post that full-time W-2 income. But it really sounds like for you, that was a much needed identity shift in terms of, like you said, where you put your energy. And you're exactly right. I feel like COVID did that for a lot of people, is that it really caused us to go inside and really evaluate, like, where are we spending our time and how much time are we giving up with certain aspects of our lives. It's not that they don't matter, but like your priorities have shifted. And I think sometimes when you're facing, especially like a global pandemic, and
Right.
it's scary and people are dying and you have loved ones that are ill and you can't can't see people, it really causes you to think about those priorities differently.
Right. And I will say too, I mean, it's almost like I had a complete just life shift really, because I also experienced divorce, which I feel like almost embarrassed to say it, but this was my second marriage. But I just knew that I could not live like this any longer in this particular relationship because I was just struggling so deeply. And it just took this pause in life, like really in general. And I just realized that you talk about the priorities, like where are my priorities and how am I living and what do I want to see in my life? And it was just so crystal clear that this was not the path that I wanted to be on. And so being able to just kind of have that time and really just say, okay, what do I want for my kids? Do I want them to be in this environment or do I want to make a change? And it's just been so freeing. And every day I do this gratitude journal and I just write down 3 things that I'm thinking about. It can be little things. And every day I'm like, I am so thankful for the life that I've been able to build and where I'm at now. And it's just really refreshing. And I know that in writing this book that I've been working on, I've been looking at my past life and seeing what kinds of things were happening and where my mindset was. And I feel like I'm such a different person now. And I have had that gift of being able to have reflection time and look back. And it's just been amazing.
Yeah, I can't even imagine. You started the book, what was it, in 2004? There has to be something so enlightening in terms of going back that far in your life and really exploring all these different changes that have happened to you, because it sounds like for as much as you were very concrete in your decision to leave education and go do these other things, that's sort of how your book started, funny enough, with not wanting kids and believing that that was right for you, to this like absolutely pivotal shift of actually this is really what I want, and now I have this thing that I need to try to have happen in my life.
Right. And I do think too, that is one of my personality traits is once I make a decision, I'm like, this is it. It's time to
Mhm.
do this. So I'm going to take action. And friends joke about it because they're always like, you make your mind up and you just do it. You know, you don't sit and stew or worry about like, okay, what about this or what about this? You just do it. And that has its advantages and disadvantages too, because sometimes you can be, okay, I made this decision, but now what are the after effects of it? You know?
Since we're kind of talking about the after effects, take me back to that moment in 2004 when you went in and you found out that you had a non-cancerous tumor, you needed it to be removed, and it set off this series of events that I would love to explore a lot more in this podcast today around your journey to motherhood.
Yes. So, really, this journey kind of started with the first marriage, we'll call it. And I feel like I was having, I don't know if FOMO, if we want to call it that, but like always, it felt like I was just a little bit behind my friends in all of the things. And so it's kind of started with boyfriends and weddings. And so I'm looking around, everybody is getting married, they have their boyfriends, and here I am just living my best single life, you know? And so I think looking back, I'm able to have that, privilege now, but I kind of rushed into this marriage because I just wanted to be married. But again, it was a decision, it was made, and now I was like, I'm moving forward. So really then kind of the journey that transpired was I didn't want children and I loved them. I loved working with them. I really adored kids from a small age. I wanted to be a teacher. I knew that. But anytime people would talk about being pregnant, it would gross me out. I'd be like, no, thank you. That is not for me. So that was kind of like my thing. And then I went to my OB and I was just having these kind of strange pains. And he was like, I think that we need to do an ultrasound. Let's check this out. Let's find out what's going on. So basically, he came back. He was like, I think this is non-cancerous, but we definitely have to get it out. It's the size of a baseball. And so you go through all those emotions like, oh my gosh, what if it is cancer? What if I'm going to die? What is happening? And so all of those things that I'm experiencing as my first interactions with my female self. And so it was like once he removed that tumor and said it's non-cancerous, it just started creeping in like, okay, what if I want kids now? And it was like, oh my gosh, I've built this life with this partner who definitely doesn't want children. And we had conversations about it. And I didn't think that I wanted kids, but now it was like, okay, I'm shifting and changing. And this other person that I'm married to is not following along that same path. And so it just stirs up all those emotions of what do you do with this? Again, we had only been married for maybe a year at that point. I feel like a complete failure. We had this epic wedding, amazing, extravagant things that we did to get married and how awesome and all of that. And now here I am just like a year later, and I don't know that I can be married to this person anymore. And so that just brought along such a shift and change that I was obviously not expecting. And so just a short year later, we decided to get divorced because we didn't have the same vision for a future together. So,
That's the part of being human that I think sometimes people can't understand until it's happened to you, but you change. I think sometimes we have these ideas of, okay, I'm going to go marry this person and this is who I am now. And this is who I'm always going to be to some level, right? You might change jobs or you might move locations, but I don't know that you fully understand at different points in your life how much you change into different people depending on what life has tossed your way. And I resonated so much with the beginning of your book because my husband and I were married 13 years when all of a sudden I started having these inklings of I want to have a kid. And
right,
we were literally exactly like you were. Nope, we're not doing the kid thing. I was a teacher. I loved kids. I loved teaching. I loved everything about my job, but I was just as happy at the end of the day to go home, close my classroom door, and have it be just me and my husband. And
right.
we lived that way for 13 years. And I know that fear that you're talking about of how do I bring this back to somebody that we've built this life around? This is who we are. This is our identity. We're the couple without kids.
Right.
And say, ooh, JK, like,
Kidding.
I
Here we
think I'm
are.
changing my mind. Because
Yes.
it's a big deal. And what happens if they don't want the same thing?
Right.
And what does that mean for us and
Right.
me? It sounds like there were some other things in your relationship that made that decision to divorce make a lot of sense. But did you have any of these moments of, it's okay, I can still just leave this kid thing behind? I don't really have to have that. I don't need to go after that. Or like you were saying that you're just like at your core, you knew that this is what you needed.
I think it was definitely one of those decisions where it went back and forth. There were moments where I was like, okay, I think it will be okay. But then something would happen. We'd go to like a birthday party with nieces and nephews, or they'd come over and I'd be like, this is a longing that I just cannot ignore. And like you said, there were definitely other pieces that played into the relationship as a whole that solidified the decision a little bit to be like, okay, this is not the life that I'm dreaming of. I cannot live like this anymore. And I think that speaks to our personality at the core, definitely plays into how we develop and change as people. And so I would say like one of my traits is most definitely that I want to see the good in people all the time. And that makes it hard because you want to think that people will change and maybe morph with you, but then the disappointment when they don't, it's like wrestling with all of that was definitely a challenge.
You have to make the decision in order to go forward in any marriage to be constantly willing to change with the other person and figure out how your wants and your desires or your needs are going to impact. That could be a job change. It could be, I want to move. It could be, I want to take up this new hobby that's kind of risky. It could be all
Right,
sorts of things. And it's definitely something that I think is underestimated in marriage is that that's just constant. And
right.
it's part of what makes marriage complicated. It's not this rosy picture that we see in a 1.5 hour chick flick.
Yeah, for sure, definitely. And I think there's so much in balancing to what is normal versus what's a game changer. And so that is like when I'm thinking and reflecting, because it does very much feel like a failure when you get a divorce. Like you can go down this path of thinking, what is wrong with me? I made this decision and now look at where the outcome is. And so I think for anybody who's struggling with that, a lot of times it's like when you look at your future in your life and what do you see it looking like? Is it with this person? Are the things that are maybe like bothering you or not feeling great, is that something you can live with forever? Or is that something that is definitely just something you can work with, you know? And so like, how do you balance all of that.
Once you made the decision that you couldn't continue to move forward with your spouse, how did you deal with that shame around divorce? Or would you say that that's something that you continue to feel to this day? Do you feel like sometimes that's societal? Is it something in your history in particular that makes you feel that shame a little bit deeper than some might feel, even though it was the right decision for you?
Right. I really believe, and I have done a lot of work with a life coach. And at first I was like, oh my gosh, a life coach. That's so cheesy. But it was definitely something that I gained so much insight into who I am and how I react to situations. And a lot of the work that we did centered around your thoughts. And I just had, this might sound silly, but I had no idea how powerful our thoughts are.
Mhm.
And the work was really a lot about you have these thoughts, then it creates a feeling and an action, and then there's these results. And it is as simple as changing your thought. And so I really did a lot of work around that for my own self. And I would do it even in motherhood, like, oh my gosh, this happened. I'm a bad mom. I'm not doing a great job at this. And so it was like, okay, I'm just going to slightly change that thought and look at the results and the outcome and how different that is. And so that's definitely something that I've had to do a lot of forgiveness around, again, in my second marriage, feeling like I failed my kids by
Mhm.
leaving that marriage. And so that's been definitely something that I've just had to repeatedly tell myself that, I am worth it and I am worth having the way that I want to live in a calm, peaceful environment that is worth it.
Yeah, and I think it comes back to this idea, and I've heard this from several of the women that I've interviewed, but we almost view decisions like that as being selfish, and we view taking care of ourselves as a negative thing, right? Like that we're not putting other people first, or we're not putting our kids first, or we're not putting our colleagues first, or we have this idea around being selfish that it's fully this bad thing. When in fact, if you flip the script, you can't be anything for anybody else if you don't also say, I'm worth it, or this is what I need to do, or I need to take care of myself in this situation because otherwise I'm not even able to be the person that you need me to be.
Right. And so much too, I think it sets a lesson for our kids to understand. And I know that they may not understand it now, but hopefully in time that it sets the model that you are worth being treated in a certain way. And if that's not happening, to stay in a marriage or to stay in a relationship that is not serving everyone in that positive way, that's really not good for anyone. So,
Yeah. I was listening to a podcast and a woman was talking about her decision to leave a marriage. And that was exactly what she said was she got to this point where it was like, I can stay in this because I believe that this is the right thing for my kids to have. However, what am I then teaching them about what a partnership is and looks like and what a good life looks like if I'm sitting here and being unhappy? Now I'm just teaching them that it's more important to be unhappy and stay than to leave and be happy. And I thought that that was really powerful, just like what you're saying. And I feel like as a parent, that's something where your life in a very odd way becomes very on display in everything you do. You're setting an example of something, and that's an incredible amount of pressure to, I think, feel sometimes is that in everything we're doing, we have our kids watching us
right.
and we're not going to be perfect. We're going to mess it up sometimes. And other times we're going to do it really well and be like, wow, I crushed that. But also recognizing that we're human. It's not going to go perfectly. But yes, like ultimately, what are those lessons that I want my kids to be taking away from my actions?
And now that they're teenagers and they think that they know everything, so then they're giving you advice in your life and how you should be living it, which is always pretty cute and comical all at the
Yeah.
same time.
And okay, so you have two kids
Yes, yes.
and they're how old?
So Molly, she's a freshman, and then my son Vince is in eighth grade. So they're
Okay.
super close together. And not to give any spoiler alerts out from the book, but we ended up adopting Molly, and then I got pregnant with Vincent. So
Okay, what I definitely want to unpack is your journey into motherhood. You wrote the book for Molly. That's your introduction.
right,
Is kind of talking to Molly about your journey to motherhood motherhood, going back a little bit to choosing to divorce, did that cross your mind at all of like, I'm now getting divorced, which is going to, in a very complicated way, put me further away
Oh
from
my
motherhood?
gosh.
I'm putting that in quotes.
Yes,
Like,
absolutely. And I was listening to your podcast when you were talking about how you made the conscious decision later in life to get pregnant, but it's like suddenly, okay, now not only do I have the pressure of wanting a child, but now I have to find a partner. There's that feeling of like, okay, gosh, the time is so ticking away. Now, the reality of it, I don't know if that was really true or not, but it definitely was something that I felt. And I kind of joked about it in the book, but it's like, okay, let's get on this dating app and start doing the interviews, and the pool gets a little bit smaller as you get older. And so, like, that was definitely quite the adventure of trying to find someone that I wanted to spend the rest of my life with and have a baby. And it's like, this is not
no pressure.
no pressure. This is not really feeling authentic or fun, frankly. And so, as anyone who is in the dating pool now can attest to, it's a lot of work.
So I have some friends who are recently now back in the dating pool post marriage. What's your most comical story from
Oh,
throwing
girl.
yourself
I mean,
back?
this could be a whole nother podcast because unfortunately I've just experienced it again after the second divorce. But I mean, you will meet some people. Now, my advice is, and I say this to my single friends all the time, I'm like, you got to get out there. You just got to do it like it's a job. Otherwise, you can just keep swiping all day. But you just meet some interesting people. And I just looked at it as, okay, let's have at least try to have a little fun with this because otherwise you can drown. It's just like thinking about the process and thinking about your thoughts about it. Look at it like this is fun and you can laugh. But I think there's definitely a lot of really interesting people out there for sure.
To your point, you almost can't take it so seriously. You have to just ride the waves. And then when someone that could have the potential to be a little bit more serious comes along, you're like, great. But otherwise, it's just like I gave myself a night out several
Right.
times and it did or didn't
Exactly.
work.
Yeah, exactly.
So when you met your second husband, was it very clear that he was, yep, I want kids? Did that pop up on the profile and you were like, okay, and then your personalities connected?
Yeah, I could tell that he seemed different than a lot of the others. Like, it's hard because, again, you have to decipher, are these people just out here to have some fun or are they looking for a long-term relationship? And so that was hard to kind of figure out at first too. But he had a niece and a nephew and a lot of different pictures on his profile. So I could just tell that he was different. And once we met, it was really easy, relaxed, and fun. And so it just felt good. And I knew from the start that he wanted kids and he had been divorced as well. And so it was like, okay, this makes sense. We're on the right path together.
It's interesting that you both came to it from being divorced as well. I would imagine that in some ways that brings a little bit of baggage, for lack of a better word, that you're
Right.
both navigating, working together in skills and some of that shame, I guess, that you had mentioned. But at the same time, it's also like, okay, we've done that now,
Right.
right? So we know what we would do differently going
Yes.
forward.
And we know what we want. Like we both
Mhm.
were wanting the same thing, wanting a family together and all of that.
And I don't wanna give too much away in the book, so I'm gonna let you navigate how much you wanna share
Okay.
so that we don't give the book away. But once you got married and you decided that you wanted to start a family, what did that look like for you? Because I know it's been quite the road for you to get to the 2 kiddos.
It has. And I think what I want to share from that is that everyone has a different path. And there's always going to be something different about everyone's story. But ultimately, we are all looking for that same feeling of love and family and togetherness. I think that for me personally, I had spent so many years just fearing, oh my gosh, what if I'm pregnant? I had this like strange fear that I could somehow, even miraculously without having sex, get pregnant, right? And then it was like, okay, I'm going to religiously take this birth control so that there is no chance of a baby. And then it's like, okay, I'm ready now. And I don't know, personality wise, I know a lot of teachers are like type A. We are in charge of everything. We've got a beautiful calendar. We plan out our day. We plan out to the minute what we're going to teach. You have a feel from September to May. You know how September's going to feel. You know how November's going to feel. And then there's summer feeling. You have it all very much to the T planned out. And I did feel like, again, in life, I like that routine, that structure, and all of that. And now I'm ready to have a baby. And guess what? You don't get to control any of it. And so that to me was the biggest thing that I struggled with, was letting go. And really, do we ever have control over things? No, there's certain things certainly that we can control. However, when your body's going to cooperate and how you're going to get pregnant or not, you don't really get to do much control over that. And that was something that I really struggled with. And going back and talking about those feelings of inadequacy, like again, you see people that maybe don't even want a baby. They just happen to get pregnant and you're like, how? How did that happen? I'm working so hard. I am tracking every little feeling and change in my body and cycle this and ovulation that. And so that was definitely something that was incredibly frustrating and difficult.
And what age were you when you started actively trying?
I would say it was right around when I was 32, 33.
Okay. I totally hear you on that. It feels like you hear both ends of the spectrum. Like, holy buckets, I just found out I was pregnant. How did this happen?
Right.
To exactly what you're experiencing. I'm trying everything under the sun and nothing is working. And I don't know how to make it work. And I don't know how much more I can track to attempt to make this happen for myself.
Right. And I would say too, what was felt at the time super difficult was that because I feel like I'm typically a pretty positive person, talking about it in the circles and the groups, it just felt really depressing. So it was hard to be around friends, for example, college friends, when they're sharing their baby stories and they're going off to preschool stories. And then you're over here and you're like, I have nothing to contribute to this conversation. So it could feel isolating. And that is one of the reasons that I really wanted to write this book, was that I wanted others to know that there are people out there who are experiencing the same thing as you, and that this is a struggle, and it's okay to acknowledge that it's a struggle, you know?
What would you say were some good takeaways, but also maybe some boundaries that you had to have for yourself within those support type groups? Because as much as sometimes I think it can be good in any aspect of your life to be in a group where you and I found each other in Boss Mom, right? We're
Right.
at a stage where we're promoting something or selling something, or we're at a stage in our life where we're wanting to be connected to other women who are in a similar space. There can definitely be positives to that, but there can also be negatives. So, where did you find those support groups that were perhaps the most successful for you? But what were also some boundaries that you had to put in place at the same time?
So, one of the things that I found just really helpful, and this just happened for me, but a friend who had gone through similar experiences in life. And so, being able to know that when I was struggling, that I could talk to her about it was just incredibly helpful. And also see her as an example, like, okay, she went through this struggle too, but now look, she ended up adopting a little girl. And so being able to really rely on a very close friend was just so helpful. And I think to navigate the hard situations, I just had to give myself grace sometimes. And so if there was a baby shower and I wasn't feeling like celebrating at that time, that I just didn't go. And I didn't beat myself up about it. I just said, this is just an event, and talking through that, like, okay, they're probably not even going to know if I'm there, that kind of a thing. And just allowing grace. And if you want to be sad about it, it's okay to be sad. And it's okay to take some time to grieve, or whatever you need, your friends and family are going to understand.
Because you are very much grieving this lack of identity that you're seeing other people live out. And that can happen in a lot of different ways, that we lose things or aren't able to achieve things in our life. That can be through the loss of a spouse, and then seeing other friends of ours as couples going out for date nights, or
Right.
even, I'm assuming even in divorce, it can feel that way too, of, okay, this didn't work out for me, but now I'm seeing these other couples experience these things together and I don't have that. I think that that's a very natural part of grieving something that you so badly want, is that it's always going to be hard to see somebody else living out the existence that you wish that you had
Right.
or would like for yourself.
And then I think too, for me, I also have this guilt of experiencing maybe, I don't know, a jealous feeling. And so it's like, okay, trying to talk through that can sometimes feel really difficult.
So, when you were going through that time, what ultimately led you to the decision that adoption was right. Did you have this change of heart and just decide, I'm done working through this on my own, quote unquote, naturally, and so I'm going to adopt? Or was it more just that you started to feel this calling of adoption is the right thing for me no matter what?
For us, we experienced like an intermediate in between just our regular OBGYN and going to an infertility specialist. So we had this experience with this group. It's called Parents locally here in St. Louis. And it was kind of like a liaison where the nurse would work with you and be fully supportive in all the things that you were doing to get pregnant, and then report back to the doctor and get support through that. Because I will say, even something as simple as going to the OB's office can be triggering when you're trying to get pregnant because there's babies all around. And so it's just constant. So this was a way to get some support, but also help us figure out what is our next path. And given my age, it was like, okay, our time is limited, And so also we knew financially that things were limited. And so our minds, we thought, okay, if we go down the path of IVF, in vitro fertilization, then that's a lot of money. And it's not a 100% solid guaranteed rate of getting pregnant. And so we were like, where do we want to spend our time and also our financial situation? Where's that going to be best? And so we thought adoption. And I was kind of thinking about like the moment where it was like, okay, this journey has highs and lows. And here is the moment that is. And it really was that moment that we decided to turn our path towards adoption. That was going to be our way to parenthood, because it was just like an encapsulation of so many feelings. And when they talk about the grief process when someone dies, it was kind of similar to that in a way, because you're experiencing this grief and frustration of like trying to conceive. And then you have this moment of acceptance, like that's not going to be our way to parenthood. I am not going to carry a baby. I am not going to experience giving birth or breastfeeding or all of those things. And then there's the worry like, okay, if we adopt, this child isn't going to necessarily look like us. We were very open to all races, genders. And so there's the things that you think about, and then what's going to happen later in life? How are they going to feel about that? And this feeling of total and pure excitement. Okay, this is really going to happen. It was like all of those feelings just in one ball, like, here we go. And so it's a lot to take in, just like with any decisions in life.
Holy moly. And then too, even once you get yourself to the point of adoption, and I don't know if you talk about this in the book because I'm not there yet, but you have to make a lot of decisions then around the adoption. I mean, are you going to adopt from outside of the country? Is it only in country? Is it going to be an open adoption in which they still have a relationship with their birth parents or parent? What was your decision making process around that like?
There were so many things. We knew that we didn't want to do an overseas adoption just because of the travel aspect and element. My husband at the time, Mike, we were both pretty structured beings, and we just wanted to try to eliminate that extra element of travel. So we knew we wanted to stay local, and we also knew that we wanted a baby, and then knew that for both of our hearts at the time, that foster work was not something that we wanted to do. So we did end up going with a private agency, and it was, I will say, it was one of the best experiences. Everything was just organized to a T. And so it was like, okay, here's your packet, and these are the steps, and here's how this is all going to work and flow. So there wasn't a lot of figuring out things in that sense. However, when we talk about the feelings that go along with it, it was a lot of proving yourself is not the right way to say it, but there was just so much, because obviously they're working with you to bring another child into your home. And so they want to make sure that they're doing the best research that they can and providing the best environment for this child. And so it did feel like there were a lot of hoops to be jumping through when others could, again, just naturally conceive a child. So there's a lot of feelings going on at that time. And so that was one of the reasons I started a blog, because again, during this time frame, there wasn't a ton of social media around to be able to connect with others like there is now. And so this blog was just a way for me to kind of document all of the things that we were experiencing in time.
And was that hard for you with the blog when you started that, to put all of that out there? Or was it mostly just therapeutic and you didn't really think about who was on the other side of that reading? Or did you feel like you had to filter certain aspects of what you were putting out there?
No, it's funny. I think anyone who knows me knows that I'm really an open book and I just tell everything about my life how it is. And so I had to kind of frame it. Even in writing the book, transferring the work from the blog to the book, I did have to filter a little bit because I was probably a little more frank or honest on the blog than I was in my book necessarily. So that'll be like a bonus feature that I'll put at the end where people can go back and find the true feelings. No, I'm teasing.
Yeah, that's so interesting. And was you moving stuff from the blog to the book your personal choice in terms of filtering some of that out, or was that like an editing,
Well,
like an editor call?
I wanted to really just reach as many readers as I could, and I didn't want to be offensive at anything. So I did try to filter just a little bit out.
And I noticed at the beginning too, you have a little bit of a caveat of this is my story. I recognize that everyone's stories look a little different. I'm curious just because nowadays on social media, I feel like you get ripped apart if you do and you get ripped apart if you don't, right?
Yes,
Like
for
it
sure.
we've lost a little bit of this just because someone's choosing to put their story out there doesn't mean that somehow they're attacking your story or that they're judging you for your story. How are you navigating some of that? I mean, as a published author, especially moving from a blog to a book, are you preparing yourself for any of that sort of feedback that could be coming?
You know, it's so interesting that you say this because I do feel a little bit like I've kind of lived in like an adoption silo for a while. And I say that because a lot of these authors are talking about like, oh, get on TikTok, do these different things to build your social media presence. And as I'm doing it and searching some of these different keywords, I'm like, oh, there are some very, very strong feeling people about adoption. And I literally just had no clue that this existed. So I do feel like most definitely the opportunity will exist, that there will be some hater somewhere that will not love what I've produced. But I think probably being a principal that I have had some tough conversations and tough skin in certain different situations. So, I just recognize that that's definitely going to happen. But I think for the most part, it just feels good. If nothing else, I have shared my story and I said I wanted to write it and I did it. And so that just feels really good to be able to share that with the world.
So I have to ask because your daughter is older now, how has her relationship or her idea of this adoption or your relationship with adoption, how has that evolved? And then has the book impacted that at all?
Right. So we have always been very honest with her about everything related to her adoption as much as we know we've given to her. And we've always said that at some time in your life, when you are ready, if you want to navigate that and you want to meet your birth mom, we will work to the best of our abilities to make that happen for you. We've just kind of felt like we wanted everything to just be as honest and open as we could. As far as the adoption itself, we didn't have a lot of contact with the birth mom in that like reciprocal relationship type of situation that some people experience with an open adoption. So when I wrote our blog, there was a service where you could have it printed and bound, and then it kept like all the comments and all of that together. And so I used that as our baby book, really. And as a teenager, she would get it out and she'd be like reading it to her friends, which I'm sure they could have probably cared less. But one night she just came to me and she was like, Mom, I am so proud of you for all of the things that you went through to get me. And it just really brought me to tears. And I was like, that's so sweet of you to say. And she was like, I really do think you should write this book. And that was last April. And I'm like, okay, it's time. I'm ready. And I've given her several of the chapters to read and she's read through them. She hasn't quite made it all through the book yet. She says she's waiting for the audio version. So I'm like, okay, well, I guess I better get on that then. But, as teenagers and reading goes, but I do feel like she is very proud of her story and she has always talked about it and shared it with others too. So I hope that that continues as she grows.
Well, yeah, because as much as you're writing this book to tell your story, you're also telling her story. So, in some ways, her saying that is almost maybe that permission that you needed to put that out there because anytime you have that situation, there's more than one story being told for someone. And some kids, I would imagine, are very private about that and they wouldn't want that out there.
Right. And
Yeah.
when I was talking about filtering things, like I did have to really be conscious of what am I sharing and How do I navigate that? To readers, it may come as a surprise about the divorce because they're reading all of these things that are so positive and loving. And then at the end, it's very quickly, and then we got divorced. So that's kind of been interesting to think about. You're writing a memoir, you're putting your story out into the world, but your story has other people in it. So how do you navigate making sure that you honor the story, but also protect the others in it?
When we see our stories from our lens, we see things as being accurate because those are accurate representations of what we are experiencing. But yes, I've heard that from authors who have written about their stories as well, is that it's so much more complicated than writing fiction
Right,
because you are by nature telling someone else's story, and you have to carefully navigate that you're not painting them in a picture that would be very different from how they would tell their own story. And to your point, honoring somebody else's role in your journey is important as well, just for the health of multiple relationships, because your ex-husband is still the father of your kids and
right,
those types of things.
for sure.
So let's get into a little bit more of the logistics side of writing a book. When you decided that you were going to do this, what was your process there? Did you start writing right away and then you took it to an editor or a publisher? Did you start working with somebody first and run the idea by them and say, what do I need to do? How did that work?
Yes, so I really just dove in and I was like, I'm going to just see what happens. I did use artificial intelligence, might be like a taboo word for a lot of people, but I really embraced it. And I was like, okay, I'm going to see how it can support me as a writer. And so I used the outline of my blog to retell the story. So it's very much a chronological, starting from the beginning and working our way through it. So it was easy to kind of come up with the shell and the framework of what I wanted to say. And for me, I already had all the content on the blog that outlined all of this. It was just a matter of taking and refining to make it more story-like. And so that's really what I did. The first couple of chapters, I had to flesh out a little bit more and try to build in conversation and make it more story-like rather than just a factual recounting of these certain things. So that's what I really hope that I've drawn readers into feeling those emotions rather than me telling it to them. But I've never really written anything. So I feel super proud because I really love the way that it turned out. And I've been getting some feedback, and people are like, okay, it feels good to be reading this. And so I'm like this in life, just wanting to learn as much as I can about a certain thing. And I will just dive in and try to figure it out. So I joined different Facebook groups about self-publishing and going online and learning about how to format a book and signing up for Atticus and just all the things. So it's been really fun learning this new skill in life at 48.
That is amazing. So you did end up self-publishing then?
Yes, yes.
So cool. Okay, and because you're a lifelong learner, that seems like that was an important aspect to you. Is there any part of you that if you were to write a book again, would you do it in the same way now having done it once? Or would you go with an editor or publishing company next time, do you think?
I mean, I guess the results will tell us if the book sells. No, I'm teasing. No, I really think,
Somebody better buy it if you're
right.
listening.
No,
Yeah.
I think honestly, it was so much fun. There was just one thing after another that I'm like, okay, now how do I do this? I'm going to figure it out and learn. And I mean, it's like teaching an old dog new tricks. Like TikTok, I refused to get on it for the longest time. I'm like, it's ridiculous. What is this? But now I'm like, oh, this is so cool. Like you can see all these really neat things and people are advertising books here and there. And it's just so much fun to me to be learning different aspects of it. So
Mhm. And you named it Destination Baby, and you mentioned it in the introduction. I had my sights set on becoming a mom, but as I look back, I realize the irony in that title. By definition, a destination is a fixed point where one arrives, but I now understand that parenthood isn't a finish line, but a perpetual journey that is constantly developing. So I think that might be a good spot for us to end almost is like the title of your book. It was such a hard journey for you to get there. What would your big takeaway be from someone who's very much in the trenches who wants that to be part of their journey?
So I think that I was so set on thinking about it as a destination. Like it's a place where I'm going to arrive. I'm going to arrive with a baby. But the thing is, you're not actually ever going to arrive. You have this long journey ahead of you that you're actually preparing for. And so even though it took us a little while to get there, we are in it now for the long haul. And that is where this idea of a journey comes into play, because we're constantly evolving and learning as parents. That's literally all we do all day long, because every stage in their life is going to be different. And just when you think you have it figured out, they're going to go and become teenagers. And then they're going to go and they're going to leave you. And it's like figuring that stage out. And so the biggest lesson that I've learned through all of this is finding ways to continue to navigate the situations with grace and calmness, and trying to make the best life for all of us.
You worded that so beautifully. And I think for me, it's something that I also recognized after having my daughter, that now this is a lifelong relationship. This isn't, it's 9 months and now you have this baby, or you adopt, or whatever it is that your journey involves with bringing a person home and into your family. It's now this lifelong relationship that you're constantly navigating. And that if you're always viewing things as getting to that destination or that point, if I can just get past the terrible twos, if we could just make it to when they're 10, if we can just make it to when they can drive, if we're constantly setting these destinations for yourself, you're also not entirely living in the present. So as much as it's important to look forward and have goals and dreams for ourselves, it's also equally important to recognize that you have to have all those little stepping stones along the way to get to the ultimate thing that you want. And that even then, that sets off a whole new
Exactly.
trails.
That's a perfect summary of it.
Wow. Well, I am very excited for the release of your book and getting it into people's hot little hands. So
Thank you.
where can people find you to learn more about your story, but also where are they going to be able to access the book?
Yes. So I have a website created. It's called destinationbabyauthor.com. And there you can find links to Facebook, Instagram, TikTok. And then ultimately it'll be on Amazon. There'll be a paperback, a Kindle, hard copy. And then I guess I better go record the audio version for my daughter.
Yep. Start that today. Put it
Right.
on your list.
Exactly.
And is your blog, out of curiosity, still active for anyone that is really wanting to relive that journey in more depth?
Yes. In fact, it's interesting that you asked that, because I've been thinking of a way to give readers something at the end, because I don't know if I'll write another book necessarily, but I want something to share with them. And I was thinking, how cool would it be if I put a link to that in the back of the book? Because back then that was the only way to share like our videos and our photos. And so it's all there and you can kind of see it develop in action. So I think that's a great idea.
Cool. Love it. Well, thank you so much for telling your story today,
Thank
Angie.
you so much. It was a pleasure talking with you. I loved every second of it.
Thanks for wandering with me today. If you were inspired by this episode and think it would ignite a spark in a friend, don't hesitate to share. And if you're craving more from the Wander Mode community, hop on over to Instagram at WanderModeCo. Meet you in the next episode, and until then, wander on.